So we just had a fabulous, probably just a week at the Cannes Film Festival. I remember coming back a week later and kind of being like, oh my God, plopped back in my Bowery apartment and was picking up dog shit in the rain going, did that just happen? That is so insane. This is Justin Theroux, and this is the timeline of my career.
Got a light?
Romy and Michele's high school reunion was the first job I got that was a studio picture where they flew me to Los Angeles. I got to the airport and I remember I went to get my ticket or whatever, went to check in and they were like, you're in the wrong line. And that was the first time I realized that they flew actors first class. And I was like, oh my God. So I went over to the little patch of red carpet and I remember thinking, I want the money for this first class ticket because I saw the price of it. And I was like, can I exchange this ticket and get the money so that I can fly economy? Because I'm happy to fly economy. But yeah, that was my first time in Los Angeles. I remember I didn't have a driver's license and I lived at the Sheraton Universal and I got per diem. I lived in Telly Savalas's old hotel suite. I just thought I was like King Turd. And at the time, Janeane Garofalo was a huge star and still is. She had like this extended schedule. So even though I'm only in the movie for like a little bit, she kept having to shoot on different weird days. And I had to stay in this hotel for a very long time. I think like months I was there and I worked like 4 days or something.
Oh, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, what do you want?
You were right. I was a brain-dead redneck asshole. Although I never screwed a sheep or my sister.
Why not? Couldn't catch him?
I've actually been a party to a lot of movies that that do terrible at the box office, but kind of become notable later on, which I kind of prefer because it sort of makes you feel like all your movies are sort of like gems of records or something like that. Romy and Michele, I think there was like the 10-year anniversary and people were kind of talking about it or wanting me to comment on it or something like that. And that's when I thought like, oh, this is really kind of found a little its own place in the zeitgeist. I don't know what it did opening weekend, but it certainly wasn't anything that made you think that it was going to be anything special. Anything that's genuinely funny or genuinely good, eventually it finds its audience and rises to the top. And I think that's one of those movies.
The greatest thing about writing a successful book, besides the validation and the acclaim, is knowing that I'm pumping my ideas into the world.
I thought it was the fact that you could behave like an utter asshole and people would find you amusing.
I'm like in love with you. You know that? I'm like fucking in love with you.
I got Central Park West, CPW. I remember the part got really cut down. There was sort of a whole arc that was planned out for him. And I don't think the network probably liked him. So they trimmed him down and he never appeared again. That being said, Darren and Michael Patrick King came back with Sex and the City not that long after and offered me a part on that, sort of in a similarly sort of small role to sort of be a love interest to Carrie. And then the year after that, they brought me back again. And because we had actually such a good time, I hit it off so well with those guys that they were like, can you come back and do this better character? And the big idea, and I thought, well, it's a little weird because, it's two different guys, is it the same guy? And they're like, no, it's a totally different person. Well, let's just shave your head, give you a really short haircut and people probably won't even notice. I thought, great. Actually, people didn't really notice until it sort of came out on DVD and eventually streaming that people started to go, whoa, wait a minute, you're playing two different characters. But we thought a haircut would sort of solve that problem. And then some glasses too, like, give me a haircut and glasses and a different person altogether. But I joke that it is one of those shows in New York, or at the time it was, that like those girls went through so many guys that eventually you cycle through every single male actor in New York. And I think that it just came back around to me, like everyone who was a working actor in New York sort of got to do that show.
Do you know somebody called the Cowboy?
The Cowboy?
Yeah. The Cowboy. This guy, the Cowboy, wants to see you. Jason said he thought it'd be a good idea.
Oh, Jason thought it'd be a good idea for me to go see the Cowboy. Well, should I wear my 10-gallon hat and my 6-shooters?
That one probably had the weirdest life of anything I've ever worked on, because we actually worked on it for several years. It began with a an on-tape audition at ABC television. They wanted me to sit and just talk to someone on camera, just sort of a get to know you, sit down and chat. And that's how David does a lot of his casting. He basically just kind of vibes people, I guess. And I put myself on tape, and that sort of went off into the ether, and I quickly forgot about it. I knew it was for a David Lynch thing, but I'm never going to get that, you know. And then one day, months later, I got a call just saying, David wants to meet you. You need to go to Los Angeles this afternoon. Oh my God. Like, so I went to the airport, got on a plane, flew out there. I was supposed to stay at a hotel that night, meet him the next morning. I arrived, and then they called and said, actually, you have to go right to David's house. So I went right to his house, sort of very disheveled and not put together. It was alarming because I'd never even seen a picture of David Lynch. So I didn't imagine him to look so sort of bright and chipper. I was sort of expecting a Marty Feldman type, you know, to come to the door and lightning bolts crashing over his house. But obviously was a huge David Lynch fan. I had seen probably too young an age, Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, all his movies, Eraserhead, of course. And then we just sort of hit it off, and we just started talking. And again, we didn't really read anything. We just sort of talked about his photography and art. And then I remember he took some pictures of me, sort of, which is kind of how we got the look in Mulholland Drive, because I was wearing those glasses. I was wearing some version of a dark coat in black, and my hair was all messed up from the flight. And that was kind of the look. He wanted me to wear my own glasses and have my hair kind of like that, and sort of slightly different wardrobe.
Howdy.
Howdy to you.
Beautiful evening.
Yeah.
It was a pilot for ABC television, and it was clear from the start that they did not like what we were shooting. They kept delivering all kinds of notes. Justin's character can't smoke. You can't shoot dog shit. You can't do this. You can't do that. And David was kind of going crazy because I think the temperature had shifted since he had done Twin Peaks. They were giving him such aggressive notes. You know, it's sort of, if you hire David Lynch, just let David Lynch do what David Lynch does. But they were getting dailies, you know, of people, you know, sort of like looking off into darkness for 10 minutes straight, or stumbling around. You know, if they're just looking at dailies and not the finished product, that they would maybe start to sour on it. David at one point had asked them, well, can I do a 2-hour premiere with no commercials? Can I do, you know, an hour premiere with no commercials? And they were obviously, no, that wasn't their job. Their job was to sell commercials. Then that went onto a shelf. There was this kind of like just deep sadness between me and Naomi and David and Laura, that it was probably never going to see the light of day because ABC and Disney owned it. And then the French, God bless them, came in, Canal Plus, and somehow untangled it from all the contractual stuff, asked David to finish it. And he, to his credit, didn't say yes right away. He just said, let me think about it. And he kind of went and meditated on it. And a couple months later, had an idea about how he could sort of round it out and make it into a feature. And then they called us back for reshoots. That was the first kind of big experience that I had. I had never been to, obviously, the Cannes Film Festival or done press. I remember it with so much fondness going to the Cannes Film Festival with Naomi, Laura, and David. I can tell you the French adore David Lynch. I mean, to this day, you can probably still go see his films in a theater on any given weekend. So when you go there with him, it's as if you're arriving with, you know, the Pope. You know, doors fly open, white tablecloths come out, get slapped down in front of you, corks pop. You know, he's royalty over there. So we just had a fabulous, probably just a week at the Cannes Film Festival, and the film was received very well. I remember coming back a week later and kind of being like, oh my God, I plopped back in my Bowery apartment and was picking up dog shit in the rain going, did that just happen? That is so insane.
You can't hurt me anymore, Helen.
I'm gonna teach you and your friends about PM.
I had done stage combat in school, fencing, rapier work. Yeah, I guess stage combat. You know, how to get slapped and punch on stage, that kind of thing. That's one of those things. It was such a big, huge production. They really they flew in the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon guys. They set up a boot camp that you could go to every day. I mean, it was like kind of like camp for fighting, you know. And we went and we would work with these Chinese guys every day with, you know, different kinds of combat, and they'd stretch you and work you out. And we'd go, and there'd be Demi Moore would be there, and and Drew oftentimes missed, but Lucy Liu was always there, and we just had a blast. Like it was like going to camp for like a month before we even started. And then we started shooting. It's one of those movies that I would do over and over again. I had so much fun. I know it's, whenever you get to do anything that sort of big or theatrical or broad, it's just fun, and you get to play with that many toys, walk through fire and, use flamethrowers and that kind of thing. It was a blast. I could have done it for a year straight. Actually, Drew kicked me in the chest with a stiletto heel, and I shut down for a couple of weeks because she broke my, this bone. We were supposed to do a thing where I'd like charge in on her, and she's supposed to reel back and then kick. She was supposed to just not kick me, and then I would react. And she drilled a stiletto heel right into here and cracked this bone. And so we couldn't shoot for a couple of weeks while I recovered. But aside from that, it wasn't that complicated. All the swords and stuff was all kind of rubber, and it was real for certain parts that would swap out with rubber. So it felt very controlled, but it was super fun.
I've done a lot more effects-driven event films than you, okay? And I think I can spot prop head when I see one. Oh, Jesus. It's corn syrup, guys. Corn syrup and latex. Warm, blood-flavored corn syrup.
I met Ben when I was doing a play on Broadway. His fiance at the time was in the play with him, and I was I'm going way back now into like sort of mid-90s. So I was a big, huge fan of that show, the Ben Stiller show. So when he came to see the play I was doing, to see his girlfriend, I just fanned out over him and just sort of quoted lines back to him, and was just very stoked to meet him. But it ended up turning out that we sort of had a similar sense of humor. And he was the one who like really kind of encouraged me to write. He was like, you should write something. And I had written a few things that I showed him, and he thought the dialogue was really funny. He was like, you should just write something. We should do something together, basically. And I was like, great. And we had sort of done smaller things together. And then he had this idea that the original concept for Tropic Thunder, he's like, I don't know where it goes or what it looks like, but basically the original idea is a bunch of sort of dumb Hollywood actors go to make a Vietnam War movie and sort of go through the boot camp experience and whatever, and then come back to Los Angeles, and they're all like in their shrink's office with PTSD, like haha, and it's hilarious. It's a great sort of germ of an idea. And me and Ben are obviously huge fans of that genre of real war movies, Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now. It was sort of like, well, wouldn't it be also funny if we actually went with them for the experience of making that movie? So then that became the idea, okay, they're going to go make this movie in the jungle, and obviously things go wrong. We just thought it would be really funny if the idea of making a big, bloated Hollywood war movie that's completely mishandled, miscast, has too much money, became the idea. We watched a lot of, and this is no disrespect to any of the actors that did this movie, but we watched a lot of the DVD extras of Platoon and Hamburger Hill, like of the actors and the way in their sort of EPKs would talk about, like what it was like to work with Oliver Stone. God bless them. It's sort of what you have to do in order to do those movies. But it was like, you don't understand, like when we were shooting it, it was like war. And you just kind of go like, oh my God, it's so not war. Except you're staying in a hotel, and except you're never going to die, and except you're never. So we just thought it was really funny how seriously these actors sort of took themselves. And again, they used to do these sort of boot camps where they'd sort of, Dale Dye would wake them up at 5 a.m. with firecrackers and be like, congratulations, you're all dead. Now what are you going to do? You're not in Hollywood anymore. You're a soldier. And so they would all take it very seriously. And we just thought that was hilarious.
Put on your war faces, gentlemen. Now, let's go and make the greatest war movie ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh. And then we just sort of came up with this cast that we threw together. We thought, what's the worst possible casting choice on every level? That's basically how the script sort of started to take form. And then we just tossed that script back and forth to each other over the course of years, and just like we'd write a scene, he'd write a scene, I'd write a scene, and we'd sort of punch each other's stuff up, and then And then eventually we had a script.
How much?
How much what?
How much?
How much do I adore you?
How much is Plank paying you?
$200,000.
That came about. I did a really fun movie with Michael Showalter and Michele Williams called The Baxter. It was produced by these wonderful girls who had a company called Plum Pictures. And we had such a good time together. They were like, look, do you want to maybe direct something? Do you want to act in something, one of our other things, that we have? And they had this script called Dedication that I sort of made some revisions on, or I looked at and I liked it, and we made some revisions on it. I was able to get Billy Crudup, who's an old dear friend of mine, and Mandy Moore, and then Tom Wilkinson, and then Diane Wiest. I think we shot it in 19 days or something like that. And it was this jewel box of a movie that we shot. We took it to Sundance and did pretty well, and we sold it to the one and only Harvey Weinstein. He said, all I want is I want you to cut 5 minutes out of it. That's it. And from then it kind of went downhill. Aside from all the other issues that man has, one of them was at the time that he really fancied himself not a curator of films, but a filmmaker. And he just kind of cut it up. And it was this horrible experience. I had sort of delivered my cut of it, and he was never satisfied. And he was always trying to bend it into a movie that it wasn't, sort of this sort of romantic comedy, but it's just not. It got to the point where he was, having interns cut my movie and send me cuts of it. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? So it started to sour very quickly. Here's maybe some fun connective tissue. While I was trying to sort of just get that cut locked, I was in Los Angeles with Ben Stiller, and we were working on Tropic Thunder together. We had been talking to Tom Cruise about participating in the movie, and he said, I love all the characters, but there's, isn't there anything else? Like we could do maybe like a studio character or something. And I thought, that's a great idea. I started writing the character of Les Grossman, which bore a striking resemblance to the person I was working with on the East Coast.
Which one of you fuckfaces is Damien Cockburn?
That's me, sir. It's good to finally meet you at last. Get some face time.
And who here is a key grip? You? You. Hit that director in the face. Really fucking hard.
We went to Hawaii to shoot Tropic Thunder. I flew back to kind of lock my reels. I got about 10 minutes into the first reel, and I realized that I was color correcting Harvey's cut, not mine. There was nothing I could do. I had to basically show up for his cut. Dedication, it's unfortunate because I think the best version of that movie, obviously, was the Sundance version. The making of it and all the way up until Sundance was a really fun experience and really beautiful experience.
So, Mr. Garvey, are you keeping the peace and whatnot at tomorrow's parade thingy?
You're not going, are you?
Probably not. It sounds depressing.
You don't want us to go?
No, I'd rather you didn't.
Why not?
I would just rather you didn't.
I would just rather you tell me why not.
You really want to go, or you're just busting my balls?
Busting your balls.
I wish Damon would publish his scripts. I don't know why he hasn't yet, but his scripts read so fast and beautifully. They're almost like part novel, part dialogue. It's never just like, enter Kevin. Kevin sits on couch. Kevin looks and says, it's always like Kevin, moist eyes. He has these very sort of fast moving descriptions. So he really is a wonderful writer that he paints the picture on the page. So I loved the script. So then I went in and Peter Berg was a producer and directing the pilot episode. And so I had a meeting scheduled with Damon and Pete Berg. Pete Berg clearly was not a fan of mine from like the get-go. Like I went in, I met with Damon. Damon was obviously a perfect gentleman, was excited to meet, loved Mulholland Drive, loved other things I'd done. Pete Berg was like 20 minutes late. He arrived like sweating from the boxing gym, kind of sat down, like looked at me, sort of askance and was like, And he kept kind of literally doing this to me, like while I'm sitting across from him. I was like, it was not kind of a friendly meeting. And then I found out later that Pete didn't really want me to do it. And for whatever reason, it's not how I imagined this, cop upstate, blah, 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 which is fine. So it went from being an offer to like, oh, you might have to work for this. So I was like, all right, well, fine. Let's get the scenes out and let's do some readings. So we went back and filmed some stuff with Pete. And then finally he said yes. Once he had said yes, completely warmed up to me, but he was definitely not, he was not sold by any stretch.
By the way, I was sorry to hear about your sister being crushed and then burned to death in that car accident. So, your score goes up or down depending on the consistency between your answers and what we've observed.
It was such a dense script written by a Leftovers alumni, Patrick Somerville and Carrie Fukino. They had so much on their plate to worry about, as far as Jonah and Emma's character, that I think they were kind of like, and then we'll get to that guy later. And so I was coming in sort of late in the process. They were already sort of in deep pre-production, up and running. And Patrick knew me, and I just said, trust me, there's some things that I want to do that I think you'll like. And it was just one of those kind of jump ball characters where it's like the lines are there, but it's not fleshed out as to who he is, what he is. He was written kind of as this straightforward doctor who was running this experiment. I guess some of the things that I brought to it were like, I would love to have him wear a wig. I'd love him to be bald. The first time we see him, I'd like to see him in what he actually is. And then I'd like him to have to sort of repair his standing. I sort of wanted to show his flaws immediately and then present this completely different person. We ended up just having such a great time doing those scenes because for all the heavy stuff and emotional work that Jonah and Emily were doing, this character was sort of the place where people could take a breath, this sort of comedic relief for the show. And we also just came up with things like, that he clearly must have mother issues. And so then we went down that road with Sally Fields, that his mother was just this dominant, crazy making force in his life. We just had a blast. It was one of those like where we sort of got to build the character from the ground up. I had so much fun playing him. I loved it. I thought it was fabulous.
Margot!
What?
What did we have?
I don't know. What did we have?
Come on, you know what we had.
You want me to say we had a bond?
Yes, I do.
We had a bond.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't read the book when it came out. I read it when I was like 15 or 16 because it came out when I was about 10. I couldn't really wrap my head around it then. The movie had been made and I'd seen that movie a million times because it was a movie written by my uncle. So I knew the character pretty well, but in the same way that anyone would know the character. I heard about it, that they were going to maybe do it for Apple. And I just thought, oh, I'd love to read that script. Like, I'd love to see what that looks like, in the serialized form. And only the first 2 scripts were written. And I thought they were fabulous. Yeah, so then I sort of just got into it. But it was already a thing that was kind of happening. It wasn't like I called my uncle and was like, you know what, we can do this. We should do Mosquito Coast and dust that off. And it was already happening at Apple with Fremantle, Neil Cross having adapted it. And I came on sort of in the normal course of things, just as an actor. Thrilled to meet with Neil and sort of get assurances that if we did do it, that it would remain a compelling character.
But we're in trouble here, Allie. We're really in trouble. We're gonna lose the house, and I don't know what we do, or where we go, what we do next.
We start again. We just make the move, and we start again. Kick off the dust. Light out.
Ali Fox is sort of the archetypical American anti-hero, but just sort of turned up to 10. So yeah, I can identify with, the problems he has with the country. I think it's something that sort of universal. I think every single American has issues with our country, whatever side of the political spectrum you fall on. He's just a guy who sort of lives or enacts his grudges against the country. He holds everybody, his family included, like to the same moral standard that he has. And I think, frankly, there's another side of him that just wants to, get out of America, throw a grenade over his shoulder and say, it's done. I'm going to go find my own happiness, which is also sort of a very American trait, to sort of have this wanderlust, go west kind of attitude. If you're not happy where you are, sort of colonize where you're going. You know, I was talking to Paul, this is something I didn't know about the character. I said, what was the reason for writing this character? You know, who was it based on, et cetera, et cetera. He said, well, before I wrote the book, I was following, like a lot of Americans were, the Jim Jones massacre, you know, which had just happened. No one really knew who Jim Jones was until, you know, 800 people swallowed cyanide. And he was just baffled as to how that could happen. Midwestern preacher, ended up going to San Francisco. His following grew. Eventually they moved to the jungle. And so he was sort of obsessed with what is essentially a cult leader, someone who can get you all the way to the point of drinking poison, you know, in a mass suicide. And what kind of character and what kind of conviction and what kind of neuroses that kind of person would have to have in order to wield that kind of power over other people. He said, I don't want to draw too bright a line between Ali Fox and Jim Jones. I think they're totally separate people. There is this sort of cult of family thing that takes place in the book. The person's belief systems and their values go from being sort of a benevolent thing to a overbearing thing, where you're ending up depriving other people of their happiness or their free will, all under the guise of your own free will. So I think that's sort of one of those parts of the character that I definitely don't identify with, but I would say fascinating, or at least makes him interesting to play. The good thing about film is that it's permanent, or semi-permanent, I should say. Nothing lasts forever, but I have belief in that the reception is not as important as the endeavor. So I really like that when a movie kind of sort of lives beyond its expectation, you know, and that people find out later. Same with, you know, American Psycho was kind of like that. Zoolander was certainly like that. I don't pay attention much to the box office. It's nice when people like things, but it's not a marker of quality necessarily.